It started with Seiya Suzuki. It continued with Shota Imanaga. They want to be a destination. Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic. Patrick, Roki Sasaki is coming to Major League Baseball. That news broke over the weekend, late at night. This is one of the better pitchers, more hyped pitchers to come from Japan. Let's kind of introduce who he is to the audience. Make sure everyone knows him. Not everyone is like us. He's I believe he's 23, but we've been hearing about him for the past 6-7 years. This is not a new name for people really plugged into this, but it is. He's finally coming over, and it's going to be a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I think the question with him was, would he be posted this winter? When is he coming over to Major League Baseball? And now that that's been resolved, it's going to be kind of a recruiting contest, and we'll get into that later. But there's no doubt about the talent. I mean, this is a guy who's just physically gifted, a fastball that can reach 100 miles an hour, kind of when he's right. There are not many other just pitchers in the world who have more raw ability than he does. I think we've seen this of pitchers coming over from Japan have a pretty successful track record. There's a lot of data and information available on them, and I think teams are better equipped to help them with that assimilation process. And so this is a guy who's had Cubs president Jed Hoyer visit him, Mets president David Stearns go over there. Obviously, there are teams like the Dodgers and Padres who have huge presences in Asia. And so this has been the name for a while now. Really a player who could absolutely transform a franchise, not just because of his ability, but also the unique circumstances in which he's become available. Affordable to all 30 teams, not unlike Shohei Ohtani when he came out after the 2017 season.
Right. If he would have waited, I believe, 2 more years,
correct,
he would have been a free agent, right? And what happens now is he's under the IFA bonus pool rules, and he's limited in how much he can make. He's essentially a minor league. Is it a minor? He's got to sign a minor league contract. It's kind of fascinating, and you're right. It's like what happened with Ohtani. I was looking at the pool, so it depends when he's posted under what pools the teams are going to be under. If they're patient and wait to post him until some point in December, I believe it transitions on December 15th to next year's, to the 2025 pool. And that's then everybody's not equal footing exactly, but pretty good footing. I think the highest pool, the highest teams are at 7.5, just above 7.5 million. And that's a bunch of, really small market teams from Cincinnati, Tampa, Oakland, that type. And then 6.9 million Diamondbacks, Orioles, teams like that. So the next tier of small market. And the Cubs are in that third tier. They're not in the lowest tier. They're in 6.2 million teams like San Diego, the Cubs, the Red Sox, the Mets, the Yankees. So a lot of teams that we're going to be hearing probably want Sasaki, right? And the bigger markets, if he wants to go to a team set up to win, those are some of the teams. The Dodgers actually have the lowest pool when it comes to the 2025 pool, but they have the highest remaining in the 2024 pool. So if he's posted early, the Dodgers are the team, right? We'll get into that competition.
Yeah, we don't need to crush everyone else's hopes.
But right. Yeah. But I mean, there's certainly other teams that are in this. One thing I was told about him, you mentioned the 100-mile-per-hour fastball. So, we can talk about fastball shape and all those things. How good is a fastball just because it's velocity? There are some grades out there that say that the fastball isn't as good as it should be. There's also some stuff out there that just loves the splitter. I was told by one scout it's the best splitter ever. Like not not like a
Better
really
than
good
Mark
splitter.
Leonard Jr.'s?
Yeah. Yes, shockingly better
Okay.
than his. So their scouts love this guy, and I think there's something to be said for working in the U.S.
Yes.
and how you use your pitches will be different. How pitching coaches in the U.S. want him to attack hitters will be different. It's hard to just go off how things went with the fastball in Japan because hitters are different there. The zone is different there. We talked about this a year ago with Shota Imanaga. So that'll be an interesting factor, I think, as well, how he's used by teams, how his arsenal is implemented, and how teams are maximizing what he has. I think he has. Those are the two things that stand out about him: the fastball velocity and the splitter. But it's not like he's a 2-pitch pitcher. And like I was saying, this is a guy that I can't remember the big teenage Japanese tournament, what it's called. But that he's one of those kids that made a name for himself in that tournament, became this superstar, was touching 100 as a teen. Just one of the most hyped names. Yamamoto got all this hype last year, but we only heard about Yamamoto, or he was only hyped for about 6 months before that. Like, Sasaki has been hyped for years. Like, this is a really big deal, and it's the biggest name since Ohtani. Maybe just a tier below Ohtani and like close to the Darvish level of hype here. It's pretty big. This is and the fact is the Cubs are being mentioned, and that's at least it gives Cubs fans a kernel of hope after we've crushed all their hope with everything else we've written and said.
Well, one quick snapshot. I'm glad you brought up Yamamoto, who came over here as an extremely polished pitcher. That's not quite Sasaki yet. He's dealt with some injuries over the years. His workload has not been the same. Over in Japan, I don't think it's realistic to expect him to be what Yamamoto was this year for the Dodgers. Granted, he dealt with some injuries. He had some availability issues, but that's a guy who beat the Padres in the playoffs, won a World Series game. Like, that 2-year gap, not just in terms of the money, but in terms of development, that is a big thing here as well, that he has room to grow. And I do think there's a feeling that getting him out of his comfort zone and a place where he will be challenged in a lot of different ways could accelerate some of that too.
All right, Patrick, why don't we take a quick break and then come back and talk about how teams will be recruiting him, particularly the Cubs. What's their pitch to Roki Sasaki?
Looking for recipes to bring the autumn feels? Hello, have you tried HelloFresh yet? America's #1 meal kit gives you over 50 recipes to choose from. Each week, they pre-portion the ingredients and then they ship them right to your doorstep.
Picky eaters like Scott or people looking to fit a specific lifestyle have met their match. HelloFresh features preferences like fit and wholesome, quick and easy, or vegetarian.
HelloFresh helps me eat healthier and maintain my presence as a popular chef at home with my kids. I'm bringing variety to the dinner table.
Just stop with the endless recipe searching, or you're spending a whole bunch of money on a big jar of spices just for a pinch. That's all you need. You can also get step-by-step recipe cards, making cooking simpler by using HelloFresh.
Get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/freeFT. Applied across 7 boxes, new subscribers only, varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/freeFT.
Okay, Patrick. Obviously, the Cubs have had some success in recent years when it comes to signing players from Japan. You and I have talked to a lot of people in the front office. Ever since Jed Hoyer became team president, this has been a focus of his. It hasn't been at the forefront. It hasn't been something that has been like super well publicized. but it started with Seiya Suzuki. It continued with Shota Imanaga. They want to be a destination. I mean, really, to be honest, from what I understand, this idea, this concept started when they first pitched Darvish back in, when they first started 2000, what was it, 13? When Jed and Theo were first here. Like that's when this concept, this idea kind of came into their minds, and it's kind of grown since then. They ended up getting Darvish as a free agent, and I think that really spurred a lot of this. Like, okay, we have a big name that we can say, look at what we've done. Look at how comfortable we made him. Look at how we helped him. And they did make Darvish very comfortable. They did make him, they did help him maximize some of his arsenal. And now Jed Hoyer has, you said he's been there multiple times, from my understanding,
yes,
this year. This is a priority of his. And some of that may be because they understand that the way our budget works, the money that we're working with doesn't allow us to go in on this true superstars of free agency. But here's a way to get around that. How much would established Seiya Suzuki go on free agency right now? How much would he make this year if he was hitting free agency, right? Compared to what they ended up signing him for. How much would Shota Imanaga be making if he hit free agency now after the season he just had with the Cubs, right? So they're looking for ways to kind of work around and find impact talent. It's the same thing we talk about, but like with that they try and do all the time. But this actually is like, these are established talents in another league that somehow have their in different situations have their salary kind of tamped down a bit, and in this case it's especially so. I think the pitch is simple. Darvish is a fan of what's going on with the Cubs. Has nothing but good things to say.
Yes.
Seiya Suzuki's transition wasn't perfect, but he eventually found comfort, and he eventually found a way to live comfortably in Chicago. Shota Imanaga's, I think they learned from those experiences and really helped his transition to a new country, a new team, a new league. I think those are three great selling points that this team has. And that's just with their history of Japanese players.
Without a doubt. I think there's a small select group of teams that can really invest in the scouting infrastructure in Japan to kind of pay for that coverage, to also have like the connections and the credibility to forge relationships and close deals and gather information that gives you more confidence to make what are still sizable investments. I mean, particularly when you factor in the posting fee for those major league contracts. I mean, say is $100 million player, essentially. Shota could wind up being close to that if he maxes out his deal and you include the posting fee. And then the numbers we're talking about, there aren't that many teams that are willing to kind of go to those numbers for guys who've never played professional baseball in America before. And if you're a player coming over from Japan, there aren't, like, certain cities are way more attractive than others, right? And right. Chicago is a very cosmopolitan, world-class city. It has that reputation that you're talking about, Sahadev, amongst Japanese players as a comfortable place to live, where families feel good about the opportunities in front of them. The Cubs are really good at this recruiting stuff. I mean, Joel Wolf, who's part of the representation team at Wasserman, who will be handling part of the Sasaki stuff, once described the Cubs as recruiting like the University of Alabama football team. That was after they lured Darvish. And there are certain ways to sort of pitch guys from Japan that it is a little different than, some major league player who may be a little more jaded or may have a little more understanding of the landscape, or more, they may rule things in or out in different ways. And the Cubs have a ton of credibility in this space.
Yeah, and that's actually something that they've built. My understanding is they were a little, 10 years ago, whatever, 5 years ago, whatever it may be, they were a little concerned with the reputation of Chicago, compared, not that it was bad, but you compare it to Seattle, LA, San Diego, they thought they were just a full tier, if not further, behind those teams for when it came to trying to bring Japanese players over to Chicago. They were concerned about that. They've built a really good reputation there. One underrated area, I think, part of the pitch is Tommy Hotovy does really well when he's put in front of these players. He did really well, from our understanding, when they were recruiting Shohei Ohtani when he first came. Is that right? Am I remembering that, or was it Darvish that he did?
He did
whatever.
My understanding is he did both, and that they sort of have it down, not to a science, but they have their go-tos. They have, which you've written about extensively, kind of the technology, the innovation, the player development infrastructure that I think speaks to a lot of players, but in particularly a young guy coming out who's going to want to maximize his career in the majors.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, Hotovy doesn't get a lot of love nationally, but every single time pitchers come to play for the Cubs, that's one of the first things you hear. Like, what do you like about it here? What have you enjoyed, whether they're coming or going? I mean, Jameson Taillon, Drew Smiley, Yu Darvish. Yu Darvish is part of this pitch. He plays for another team, and you can still sell other players on, look at how much Yu Darvish loved his time here. Now, we'll get to this soon, but San Diego is also competition here. So maybe he's not going to give direct support this time around, but who knows? And I think you're right. You brought up Joel Wolf. Joel Wolf has, this is an agent that has repeatedly done deals with the Cubs. Like his group, they consistently have clients that work well, that come to Chicago. He's got a good relationship with this front office. I mean, this isn't lining up where it's perfect for the Cubs, but it's not something you can rule out, because there are a lot of good things going for the Cubs.
Yeah, I think you have to consider them in the conversation, because Yu Darvish years ago could have buried the Cubs and just said, he's traded midway through a 6-year contract in the middle of a pandemic, after they won a division title, after he had a Cy Young Award caliber season. And what did he do? He actually recommended Chicago to Seiya Suzuki, and he didn't advise Shota specifically about the Cubs. It was more of a, as he was kind of before he entered the process, it was, what should you value? And Darvish's main point was, go somewhere that shows you love, that it's not always going to be perfect. It can't only be about money. It has to be a place that, will support you. And Darvish felt that from the Cubs, from Wrigley Field, from Cubs fans for a long time. And that word of mouth stuff goes a long way, especially when it's a sort of godfather figure among Japanese players. That's Darvish, and he gives the thumbs up to the Cubs.
All right, Patrick, why don't we take a quick break and come back and break down the competition here for Sasaki. Patrick, Roki Sasaki, going to be a big name. Obviously, everyone is kind of in on him depending when he's posted, right? We know who the number one team is, right?
Of course.
Who the favorites are. It's the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, I think some people have kind of just said, this is it. It's done. Don't bother thinking about any other team. I don't know how the pushback I've gotten on that. I don't know how much of that is just like trying to stir up competition or if it's really legit. Like this is this is more than just the Dodgers, race to win. And some of it makes sense, right? Does he really want to be on a team that like is followed like the Dodgers are, where he'll just be one of it's already an insane media following, right? I can't imagine what their clubhouse access is like and what it's like to try and interview anyone in that area. It would reach another level with Sasaki. You'd have 3 of the 10, 5, 8, something like that, biggest Japanese stars ever on one team, plus 2 other star American
future
stars.
Hall of Famers.
Yeah. Like it'd just be insane. Maybe he doesn't want that. And I think what's most interesting is we don't know what he wants. He hasn't come out and said it. He hasn't come out and said, this is what I prefer. This is what I like. A lot of times you have a better idea. This guy's been really quiet. Him and his representation, everyone around him, they haven't been blasting out there what is wanted, which makes our assumptions like all the more faulty, right? Like we can't make great deductions here.
I do think a lot of this is second or third hand information from, which may have originated in a different language. You know what I mean? Of just like trying to decipher this is certainly difficult. I mean, let's be upfront, like the Dodgers in almost anything have to be considered a front runner. If they want a player, they usually get what they want. That's what recent history has shown us. They are an extremely attractive place to play. Their player development systems are kind of the best in class, right? I mean, it's really hard to poke holes in their argument. But like you said, we just don't know. And we've heard lots of conflicting things, just looking at the players we've covered over the years here. It was, I think at one point, conventional wisdom was, Japanese players don't like to be on the same team. They kind of want their own space or their own spotlight. And then obviously Ohtani totally changed that. And then you have Jed and the Cubs saying, we've actually learned a lot from Seiya's assimilation process. We've been able to apply those lessons to Shota, and Shota being very grateful for kind of what the Cubs had put in front of him. I think the Padres also can point to an excellent relationship with Darvish and Joel Wolf and a history of, flat out just being good and being competitive and having a great atmosphere in their ballpark, as well as, a beautiful place to live. The Mets under Steve Cohen and David Stearns have also made a concerted effort to be a presence in Japan. The Phillies have as well. The Phillies don't have that history. I think they saw a gap in their organization, frankly, a much wider one than the Cubs had, and they've tried to ramp up there. They kept extending themselves, trying to sign Yamamoto last year. Now, obviously, this is a different sort of competition here where money isn't the kind of end all be all, but I would imagine that they have to explore a lot of different options here, unless he is absolutely dead set on the Dodgers. Like, why wouldn't you open this up and see what you can learn and ultimately what you value?
Yeah, and I think there may be pushback like from some fans, especially jaded Cubs fans, right? And understandably, jaded Cubs fans say, why would you come to the Cubs over the Dodgers or the Padres, right? The Dodgers and Padres, probably 2 of the best teams, if not the two best teams in baseball this past season, right? And they don't look like they're headed for at least not a serious downswing next season, right? They're both going to be right there. The Cubs are not at that level yet. They're just not. But the pitch is as simple as, look at, we have this established talent. We have these two Japanese players that have done well here and feel comfortable here. And you'll be a part of our stable of young players coming up, right? And that would be this isn't, we're about to hit, their pitches, we're about to hit like these next 5 years of great success. That's in their minds, right? Like that's what they envision. And that's how you present it to Sasaki versus all those other teams you mentioned who are all playoff teams, right? And Mets, Phillies, Padres, Dodgers, those are playoff teams. Those teams all just, showed what they can do already. So this is more about envisioning what could be. Harder sell, but it's possible, I guess, if it all depends on what he's looking for. But I mean, you name teams that should put a little bit of a feeling in your stomach if you're a Cubs fan, like, oh, I don't love hearing that, because they all have really good pitches and they all have really good teams. So and any one of them would happily welcome a league minimum starter. That's a big thing here.
The Yankees,
like all of them want, if bonus pool, you just max out your bonus pool and say, I'll just take whatever you can give me. If that's what this ends up being, that's kind of a game changer for any team, adding this to your rotation, a league minimum salary for the first, couple years of that contract. That's, it would be a dream for Jets and their payroll.
I mean, our colleague Dennis Lynn wrote this up in the Athletic of the Padres are kind of getting squeezed with their payroll at this point, and he'd be like the dream solution. If Jed and Carter and their group could somehow close this, I think it would immediately change the perception. They'd still have, a lot of flexibility left over. But you could run that team back and put Sasaki in there. It just changes the whole perception and kind of aura around this team and the program they're trying to build. And I will say it was good to see like Shota and Seiya this year up close, and to remember like they have two very different personalities. Like I was trying to think of like if John Lackey and Kyle Hendricks went to go pitch in Japan, like you wouldn't think, oh, those two guys are exactly alike, right? And so Sasaki may have preferences or personal histories or just kind of interest priorities that are obviously unknown to us and maybe different than just the conventional wisdom of, oh, he's definitely going to the Dodgers, even though I think if anyone had to bet on this, you'd go with the Dodgers.
Yeah, they're the heavy favorites right now, just based on what we know. And like you said, we just don't know a lot. There's not a lot that is concrete fact here, but it would be hard to bet against them. I think that's the reality. One thing we do know for certain is upgrading the rotation is an absolute priority for this team, for the Cubs. Sasaki would be the just like that would win the offseason for the Cubs. That's
without a doubt.
That's how you turn public opinion in your favor. It would be the home run signing, probably the only realistic addition possible this winter that I could see fans finally like starting to turn, because right now, especially with the rest of sports in this city, all the other teams, nobody's happy right now. If you're a sports fan in Chicago, it's hard to find much joy. Every Sunday is like a lesson in misery in this town, watching the Bears. So some organization needs to turn the tide, and that's the only way I really see it as realistic, unless there's a trade out there that I'm missing. But because we've reported, no Corbin Burns, no Juan Soto. Those were the two names that could have turned the tide when it comes to morale with the fan base. I think Sasaki's the only other one.
You make a great point with the Bears. I had been thinking of that, of the Cubs are to Japanese players in a total opposite to what the Bears and first round quarterbacks are, right? Of like in terms of, I didn't probably phrase that exactly as smoothly as I would have liked, but when you talk about infrastructure, track record, credibility, the Cubs have that in a way that the Bears certainly don't at the quarterback position. But, if you're a young Japanese pitcher who wants to challenge himself and maximize your talents, you could do a lot worse than the Cubs. And, in the end, maybe Dodger Stadium, Shohei, Yamamoto, Southern California just blows the Cubs out of the water. It's not going to come down to money, but I think the Cubs have put in a lot of work to give themselves a chance here.
Yeah, and that's all you can really ask for at this point. I'm curious to see when he's posted. I'm curious to see what we hear from that side of things, how quiet it'll be. There weren't a lot of Imanaga rumors, right? There just weren't. That was very quiet until the end. Obviously, we knew Ohtani would be a quiet process. We were told it would be quiet, and it was. All the rumors out there were like not the strongest at times. So I don't know what this is going to look like, and maybe we'll have a better idea when we're down in Dallas in a few weeks. But this is going to be a fascinating one to follow. I'm glad he's posted because it kind of spices things up here, and will make for an entertaining offseason. It gives us a little bit of excitement with Burns and Soto kind of crossed off to start the winter that had to be hard for Cubs fans. So at least we get to spice things up and make things a little bit more entertaining here.
We can get back to our regularly scheduled doom and gloom for our second episode this week, but our good friends at Foul Territory, our advisors and producers there, had a great suggestion, just only focus on Sasaki here, because it's helped crystallize my thoughts as well of just like, this is the offseason home run.
Yeah.
That's it.
You want to see some happy fans at Cubs convention. This is the path. We'll see if they can pull it off. We'll have more for you later this week on just the general, free agency kind of kicking off, starting to get we're probably close to things happening. Maybe a week from now, we'll start seeing some actual movement. We'll see. Maybe it'll be earlier. Maybe there'll be some things happening. We'll be on top of all of that. Please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to Northside Territory. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to The Athletic, where you can find Patrick and my work. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for reading. We appreciate all of you. Take care.